What's
Dude,
going on?
that intro always I just want to start dancing in like a
Oh,
robot suit every time. I can't help it.
yeah. It's the best. I mean, we should, I think, in the future really just kind of have like a little thing in the bottom corner of the screen where we can dance and be seen. There's
Dude,
no point in dancing if you can't be seen.
I,
So,
I learned a long time ago as a kid that nobody wants to see me dance, and that's why I ended up being a drummer. So I can make people dance, but nobody.
mhm.
I'm worse than Elaine from Seinfeld. Like I'm.
Elaine's got moves though, man.
Have you seen? There's an Elaine dance contest.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like an official. It's hilarious, dude. People are wearing all these crazy old school 80s style dresses and stuff,
Shoulder
Oh my
pads.
god, yeah. So there's like a visual component, like outfit wardrobe wise. But
Yeah.
anyhow, here we are. Welcome back to Quasar with Fries. This is episode 8. My name is Rich and this is Wayne.
That's right. Thank you for just saying it.
Yeah, see, I tried to avoid the awkward gap. The last
And this is, dude. I was listening to the. Here's a shout out to a podcast I like. I've only listened to one episode, but I love what I heard. It's called On Brand.
Mhm.
But it's a guy and a gal, and they kind of just talk about like random companies and brands, and like they do like a whole hour on it. The one I listened to, the first one I listened to, was on Yankee Candle. And so I was like, I have no interest in Yankee Candle whatsoever. So if this can hold me for an hour, then they're doing something pretty
Yankee
good.
Candle, what is that?
Yeah, you don't know what Yankee Candle?
Dude, enlighten me,
the
brother. Yeah.
the little candles that are in jars.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like
Yes.
they were like the pioneer in the jarred candle space
The
with all
jarred
the super strong scents.
the jarred
They were
candle age. Yes.
really big in the 90s. But anyway, they probably did that episode a long time ago. I literally just scrolled through and I was like, "What's how far back would my app let me go?" And I got to Yankee Candle and I was like, "This is a pretty good litmus test." And I was very entertained.
Huh.
They're hilarious. But anyway, I've completely forgotten what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, that's right. Their introductions at the very beginning. I was like, "Oh wow, they're really good at that."
We should try. We should
We
take
should try
notes
to
and
emulate that. They
yeah,
were so good. They both said their name. Like, and I think for me, what it is like there's an inherent delay in this. It's not like if you were in the same room. Maybe they're in the same room, and that's why it's so
yeah.
buttery and smooth. But
I don't know. Honestly, it could just be that I was sucking at trying to figure out the best way to introduce us too. I mean, I was basically we were mimicking in our intros, trying to come into these episodes. We were mimicking like the awkward 13-year-old teenage boy at the school dance for the first time. Where he's
unintentionally,
standing
yeah.
in the corner, just going.
No one look at me. No one look at me. No
Yeah,
one look at
please
me.
don't look at me. If a girl asks me to dance, I'm gonna freak out. Oh my god. Yeah.
I'm gonna freak out.
Freak out. Okay, so today, here we are. Might be a little bit of a shorter episode, but it doesn't matter because just
We've got two
giving the
really good topics to talk about.
yeah, and giving the general public even 5 seconds of our amazing voices and content is enough sometimes,
We do have to keep that in consideration. It's
Yeah.
kind of like
It's overwhelming.
it's like
I mean,
it's like my dog. She's small. She's like a husky pit bull mix. I mean, she's just a puppy right now, but she's power dense, man. Like she's
yeah.
roughhousing with her brother, who's a like full grown like Weimaraner Doberman mix. So he's
Oh,
massive, but like she can take him out because she's so power dense. She's small,
yeah.
but like she gets all that momentum, and that's what today's episode is what I'm trying to say. It's this is
it's
a power dense
it's a
episode.
power density DEFCON 6. That's where we're at right now. Okay, well
Yeah,
that's good.
well
I mean,
said.
if people understood the amount of like the garbage bags of fan mail you and I get at our houses because of this show,
Hmm.
I had to hire an entire
Yeah,
team just to sift through it every week. It's ridiculous.
yeah. No, I haven't
So,
gotten that much. You're doing something. We've talked about this. You're doing something right, and I've got to figure it out.
yeah,
I'm still working on it.
I think the key is that I don't have a mustache. That
Well,
might be it.
see, that makes my lack of fan mail in comparison even more troublesome because I'm doing everything I can over here, Rich, to match what you're bringing to the table.
Well,
It's not
maybe it's
working.
because I have more chins. So just start eating loaves of bread and giant giant tri-tips as often as possible and don't exercise.
Oh, don't exercise.
Yeah, avoid healthy decisions across the board, and then you can look exactly like me every time. It's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Let's jump right in. So the first
Yes.
topic is, there now that the camera thing is the craze with the phones and has been for
Yeah.
years now, but it's like I feel like it's ratcheting even tighter and tighter into more, pun intended, much more narrow focus for the phone makers
Yeah.
basically, because now they're like really everybody just wants to look as amazing as possible for their selfies and their landscape photos and stuff. So
Well, there are whole industries now, though, dude, that
yeah,
are like shot entirely on a phone.
yeah,
I mean, I was listening to there was a Vergecast. I listened to a lot of podcasts, but like there was a Vergecast mini series that they're doing. Where it's called Making It, and literally the subject of this one episode was like these twin brothers, who started a YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I think it was initially it was for TikTok,
yeah.
where they go and they play mini golf tournaments with their friends, and they just film it, and then they come back and they edit together like an edit of the tournament. I think 3 holes at a time, and then one of them narrates.
Oh, okay.
That's it. That's the channel, and it's getting just bajillions of views. They're doing very well. It's called Twin Tour, I think, is the name of the channel, and so they shoot everything on iPhone. Like he
Nice.
said, actually, at one point they were like, we used a real camera when we were doing some stuff for YouTube, because they're like, YouTube, we should probably try to use a real camera, which is I would think smart, because you want to match the content to the platform. If everything looks the same everywhere, you're kind of I don't know. It's smart, I thought anyway. And they said that like the workflow just didn't make sense,
Yeah.
and they didn't see like a noticeable kind of like appreciation for the. But see, you've got like cameras coming out like the Fujifilm X-M5 or any of these cameras that have like open gate on them, where you can
Mhm.
shoot 6K, and it's like a 4:3 aspect ratio instead of 16:9, and that's literally they're including that now so that content
Huh.
creators can film landscape but then crop to vertical.
Got it.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the phones have really changed things, and even still though, like the guy that was that runs the channel and does all the editing and stuff. I think they both do some of the editing, but he was like, "We love it on the phone. Everything they do is in CapCut."
Yeah. Yeah. And that works for stuff. So I mean the higher
Yeah.
level topic here is real camera versus iPhone. Obviously that's a very loaded statement
Mm-hmm.
right there, because there's so many reasons to use real cameras and not use an iPhone. However, let's steer clear for a moment about the or from the like professional creatives who are using, you know,
Yes.
red cameras and shooting feature films. Like, we're not talking about those people. We're talking about
Right.
everybody else that has access to either a DSLR camera, a point and shoot, versus a phone. So, uh,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things for me, so I have a Canon 5D that I used to take out to do stills all the time. Still my workhorse, full frame camera, things awesome. But um, it's kind of a beast. But the
Mm-hmm.
other thing that I don't like, and this is a big part of the discussion, is like if you decide to just go with your phone, the phone has now been set up, like especially the phone app on the iPhone has been set up to get you from A to an assumed B scenario with your end result photo. And so it makes all these adjustments in
Yeah.
processing of your photo for you without you having any say in that. And if you're just grandma taking blurry pictures of your grandkids covered in birthday cake or some shit like that, cool, whatever, nobody cares. But for those of us that would like to actually leverage the power of the camera on the phone, I
Right.
don't want all of my stuff maxed out. And like, I was telling you this the other day, like I equate it with in the music industry, when you're putting stuff on Spotify and you look at final mastered songs and stuff, the trend now is to just make everything as loud and just slam to the ceiling as possible. So there's no dynamic range in the audio anymore, because everybody's just trying to go full bore, and you're taking all the feeling and the nuance out of the music. It's the
Yeah.
same thing with the phones. The iPhone just goes, oh, you're probably going to want the ISO to look like this and your shadows to look like that, and so everything is almost made to try to mimic HDR without even being HDR. It's just trying to slam everything to the ceiling so it
Yes,
doesn't even look
it's
real. And so,
everything is
yeah,
visible, right? Like
yeah.
the shadows are bad, and
And you were
yeah,
talking about, maybe elaborate a little bit on this, but the kind of the struggle going for vibe versus achieving technical perfection, by the
yeah,
numbers. You were talking about the 100 years of color science behind real
film,
photography and
yeah,
film.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Film was so. And again, I started thinking a lot about this because of another podcast I was listening to. But like John Gruber, the guy who writes the excellent Daring Fireball blog, um, he had on Tyler Stallman, who is an excellent YouTuber but also excellent photographer, does commercial photography and everything. And they were on to talk about the iPhone 16 Pro, and the 16 Pro has definitely pushed a lot of this conversation into the forefront of there's,
Mhm.
a lot of people talking about like, "Ooh, is this the one?" Because we've talked about this before, but like the USB-C port on the iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, that really felt like, oh, this is the first. That's when this is the first camera that you could like legitimately. There's no reason now why you couldn't put this into a pro workflow. Whereas before it's kind of like, well, you kind of have to figure out how to get the stuff off, and is that now it's you can connect to a USB-C hard drive or a Thunderbolt drive or whatever, and you can get your stuff off really fast.
Right.
So since the 15, and now you have the 16, and the 16 was like the splashy introduction on the 16 Pros was the addition of 4K 120. But I haven't heard nearly as much conversation around 4K 120 as I've heard around photographic styles and still photos, because Apple has basically come out. If we've talked about before, like one of my favorite cameras that I've ever owned, period, is the iPhone 7. Because some of the photos that I took with that iPhone 7, they just had a look to them. The sensor on that camera was just dreamy. I mean, like it just infused photos with like a certain look. And again,
Yeah.
you mentioned film. We had 100 years of people trying to make film look a certain way. And one of the things they brought up on that's Stallman brought up on that podcast, was the fact that film understood the limitations of the format. And so there was no, after a while they were like, this is as good technically as it's going to get, right? You have a strip of
Yeah.
film running through a camera. The shutter opens, it closes, the light hits the film, and it exposes. That's it.
Yeah.
That's as deep as the technical stuff goes. Now, from a development standpoint, there was obviously engineering and stuff being done where like we're going to try to get the best print possible. But that's the
Right.
print, right? Like that's not like necessarily the film is just, it locks in however you look. Whenever we switched over to digital, we got a lot more control of our cameras. Right, so like the light metering was better, and then like messing with the various menus and the dials and shutter.
Yeah.
You always had access to aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Well, you didn't have access to ISO on a film camera. The ISO is baked into the film, right? So you had
Right.
some exposure compensation and stuff like that, maybe, but like you were kind of like, the film is going to look the way that this film looks.
Right.
And it's
Right.
going to expose highlights and shadows.
You
So
bought
I have
you
to make
bought
sure
certain rolls for shooting at night. You
Yeah.
bought certain rolls for shooting during the day. That kind of thing. Yeah.
And it took a lot of the mental gymnastics. And now if you think about today, like you've got like film cameras from like, or not film cameras, digital cameras from Fujifilm, right?
Yeah.
So not only do you have, I'm kind of in control of the highlights and the shadows and all this other stuff because I can flick one of these mini dials, and then but I also now have these film simulations, so I can just like change the look of my film on the go, and I can bracket that stuff, and I can do all this kind of crazy stuff. It was a lot simpler shooting with film. Like once they got like a lot of the work being done on the technical side was on the lenses, right, and making the cameras better. But by the time the precipice of the digital camera age kind of came along in the 90s, 2000s, right, film cameras were better than their digital counterparts for quite a while, because they had spent 100 years working on this. And then
Right.
the work going into the film was, like you said, the color science. It was like, this film looks amazing. I mean, like today, go shoot Kodak 400 gold, And you're going to get pictures. You're just like, holy, there's lots of folks walking around who've never shot film, or gotten a roll of film developed. And that's understandable because it's harder to do that than ever, because those places all, for the most part, kind of closed up from the consumer perspective. But you will get results out of, a roll of Kodak Gold film that will blow your mind.
Dude, if you go to, I spend a lot of time, I'm already doing old people stuff. Like, I love going out to like antique shops, and there's an antique mall in Monterey, California, that's like 40 minutes from my house, and it's 2-level, tons of rad stuff to look at. But they have a whole section that is old photos, and they're organized by year, era, state, like what United States, so it might be like family in Topeka, Kansas, or whatever, and standing on their farm. But like, to your point about the quality and kind of the tonal range, that was so like they worked really hard to develop this and perfect it. You look at some of these very simple photos of like a family standing in front of their farm or their house, or in front of a car in the 50s or whatever. And there's like a sharpness and a character to these things that it's going to take another 50 years to try to recreate that digitally, in my opinion. And it's the same thing with audio. It's like there's all these old vintage amps that use organic components, tubes that warm up with electricity and stuff like that. And then now there's plugins to recreate those sounds. And they used to sound sort of like those amps. Now they're like, it's amazing. You almost can't even tell the difference. But it's the same thing, in that there really is no replacement in audio for pushing real air into a real microphone diaphragm. And on the photo side, it's the same thing, right? There's something about the organic components of an analog camera and all that science that has gone into it, and all that testing and technology and innovation over time that has maximized that medium so much that it looks incredible. And it just you can't mimic it with a filter. I mean, I know that the general public can, in their minds, they're mimicking it with a filter, but like the rest of us who would really like to use these phone cameras as a real legit tool.
I just think you just believe your eyes. And I think that if you showed two people, this was actually said during that podcast, if you were to show people the same shot, one taken by a film camera and the other taken by an iPhone, they would pick the film camera every time, because there's a dreaminess, there's a just kind of like a look there that you would just prefer over the flatness and the over sharpness of an iPhone. And again, like, we're not even talking about this to suggest that you should go out and buy a film camera, and like that's what we're talking about, dedicated versus iPhone. But to understand kind of like where digital cameras are today, you kind of have to understand we lost something in the transition to digital. Is another point that Stallman was making, is just kind of like, when we switched over, we just kind of went full in on the technical and trying to make these cameras as powerful as possible,
right?
Because there was no film to talk about. And in that process, you had Fujifilm and Kodak and all these other kind of film manufacturers that had put all the time into their craft. And so now the camera companies were doing color, and they still aren't great. Like, Sony still gets crapped on for its color science, which it's like you can make the color look however you want on any camera. Canon on the other hand, gets praised for its colors, but like most people who are shooting Canon, they're doing their own color. They're doing their own color grading. They're not taking what comes out of the camera.
Yeah, everything's coming out in log.
Yeah,
or raw.
100%.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that has then been shifted back onto us, so it's no longer film. It's either you do the color or the camera does the color. And so when we come back to the iPhone situation, I mentioned the iPhone 7. It had great colors, the sensor, but again, they were doing things back then with the camera app and with the phone itself to compensate for technical shortcomings. The phones that they're putting out today are so technically superior that it's kind of like, oh man, we could just like, how about we just no shadows or contrast.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
let's just expose everything perfectly.
Just wash it all out.
And you know,
Yeah.
I don't want to get into kind of like the problem with that. It just, but what it's resulted in, as we've talked about, is just pictures that just don't look good.
Yeah, well, there's
to
the big thing with like real photography or doing things in manual mode is like we were talking about what's missing when you just shoot a still with your iPhone or whatever, your phone, is it's kind of missing there's something you get, there's a result that you get with human intuition interacting with the device and making adjustments to get a thing. And it is an abstract and emotional thing that you're doing. It's not just technical. Photographers aren't out there shooting all these amazing photos and video and they're like, how can I just make sure that technically I get this right? No, that's like 50% of it. The other 50% is, how does this shot make me feel when I look at it?
Yeah, when it comes back up.
And that's something you can't program into a phone. And so when the phone tries to do that on its own, you end up with all this like weird homogenized versions of photos, or like certain settings were just too extreme for this, but that's how the phone decided to calculate that before it gave you the final output when you push the record button.
Yeah.
And now you have this kind of robot version of what you had hoped to get if you were trying to just rely on the phone to be in, you know, auto mode and just do whatever, you know. And
right.
Just,
and we had this very brief period where I'll keep it to, I'll include Samsung, Apple and Samsung and Google.
Yeah.
You know, today what we have is all three basically take the same photo. It's it's crazy how today they've all kind of like decided to basically just look the same.
Yeah.
Samsung still really prefers like saturated colors, and Google is a little bit more friendly to contrast and shadows. And then you have Apple, which is just kind of like super sharp, not, you know, it's going to push up the highlights to take advantage of these HDR screens that we have on the phones, et cetera. And so it's just not good. But it wasn't so long ago that when they were still kind of dealing with technical limitations and they had to have an opinion on how should this photo look.
Right.
We think a photo looks good whenever contrast is here, shadows are here, exposure is here. And so that's what you're going to get by default. And Apple had a look, Google had a look, and I think everybody agreed that Google's look was superior. It just looked like a normal photo instead of one that had been HDR'd to the moon. And then Samsung had a look too. And it's kind of like a lot of Samsung stuff was, we're going to soften skin tones and we're going to try to move blemishes and we're going to like try to make everybody look good. So again, it's like, that was actually great because it wasn't like a good, better, best thing. It was like, what do you think? Like, there's opinions here. And it was cool that they had opinions. Canon has opinions on what colors should look like. Sony, Panasonic, they have opinions. Fujifilm is very opinionated on what things should look like. And I think Fujifilm, because of their history as a filmmaker or film manufacturer, they had this like really interesting, and they finally broke through kind of with the X series cameras on offering these film simulations, because there's a difference. I'll put it this way. Like if you shoot a raw photo with a Fujifilm camera versus the straight out of camera JPEG, where, I want to match the film simulation after the fact. And it's not as good. Like, because Fujifilm is using kind of like the sensor and the lens and kind of like that nice combination of hardware and software integration to make their JPEGs something very, very special.
Yeah.
In terms of giving you filmic looks and everything. And that's where Photographic Styles comes in on the new iPhone 16, is that Apple, I think after years of hearing, we hate the way your photos look by default, is trying to give everybody more access to the imaging pipeline to where like you can bake in your look. And then if you didn't like that look after the fact, heck, you can even go back in and you can change the look completely.
Especially if you can have profiles that are like presets that are savable on there, where you're like, take a photo, spend a half hour adjusting it exactly how you want, because you go shoot those kinds of things all the time in that scenario. Save it as a preset. Cool. Now you're good, you know?
Yeah. So part of me is like really excited about what they've done with Photographic Styles on the 16 Pro. Because what you can do is you can get some pretty fantastic results with a very easy to use interface with that little joystick where you move stuff around. the main thing that is disappointing about Photographic Styles is that they don't go far enough, and there's too many options that look exactly the same or just are weird. Like some of the mood Photographic Styles, like Luminous, or some of the other ones, like they just, it's like, when would you want to use this?
I don't. I honestly, I've always hated categorizing things by mood. They do that in audio too. Like I've seen where it's like, oh, how do you want this mix to sound? And, and it'll go do some preset stuff, and it's like happy or whatever. I'm all, but that's based on what
filters,
feel a certain way. But like,
they don't want to call them filters. Yeah, so, and that's the other confusing
it or something.
Well, because it's not technically true. A filter is just like a color. It's like a filter, right? Like if you put a filter on a light, it's just like the light's going through a blue filter.
Yeah, like gels. Right? Like you throw a gel on a light. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's basically what a filter has been. Like Instagram back in the day was making our photos look better than they were because of the crappy cameras on phones. And so, like, oh, well, when I put this like yellow filter over it, ooh, now it looks retro, right? And imperfect. Right. And were we happier? Have we been as happy with mobile photography as we were in the heyday of Instagram, when Instagram was all about like filters and taking cool photos? No, we have not. And we had technically inferior iPhones and cameras. And we were delighting in those photos more now that we have these phones that, can do HDR and everything like that. So I think there's a little bit of an admittance here from Apple. It's kind of like, all right, you know what? We have our opinion. Google has their opinion. How about you make your own opinion? Like, get in there. Like, figure out what you like and save it, and then that can just be your default moving forward.
Your vibe,
and what's your vibe? Like, what vibe are you trying to go for? And, like, that's very similar to the idea of, like, if you have a favorite film, if you love to shoot Ilford 400, that's a vibe. Like, that's your vibe. That's the vibe that you prefer. And so, like, that's really cool. The issue is, and so like I remember on a couple episodes ago, I said, I'm loving Photographic Styles so much that I think that you could even, now fully replace like a camera like the Ricoh GR III with an iPhone. And I think there's still lots of situations where that's probably true for a lot of people, but I don't like just, crapping on a whole camera that has a very dedicated and like, community that loves the camera. So I went out and I bought a Ricoh GR III to see if that's the case. And like, what happened was like, I was like, I just don't want to shoot with this phone anymore. Like if I'm like this camera, so here it is, here's the Ricoh GR III. This camera is so small. It fits in it's truly a pocketable camera. Like I can just throw this in my pocket, and you know what, dude? If we went to, the pumpkin patch and all this other stuff this past weekend, and I brought this little camera, I left the phone in the car. Because I was just like, I don't want the phone. Because the phone's just going to like do notifications. Like I have no interest in posting, or I'm out here to like enjoy and like enjoy my family and take pictures. Like that's what I want to do today. And so the camera lets me do that. So that is one obviously like huge bonus.
That's actually a big part of this conversation too. And one thing that I wanted to make sure we covered was like the one or two times and why I'm on the hunt for a point and shoot right now is that the few times that I decided, you know what, I'm going to take my Canon 5D out. I'm going to bring a bunch of lenses. I'll bring a 50 to do some weird artsy stuff, and I'll bring a couple others, get some wide shots, telephoto, whatever. And like, I left my phone in my car, and then I went and shot a bunch of photos, and dude, I enjoyed myself so much more shooting photos because that was all I was doing. My brain wasn't like, and yes, you can turn off notifications, and maybe it's a willpower thing for me, and an ADHD thing. But like the fact that I have all these other apps that I could just go check my email real quick after I get this like footage of these flowers. It's like that really pulls my brain out of the creative immersion process that I try to put my brain into when I'm making things. And so the point and shoot thing, I haven't had a point and shoot since the Canon PowerShot A640, I think. Okay. That's like 15 years ago or something like that, maybe even longer. But that thing was an amazing camera. And so you have sent me a couple options, and my wife is really happy about that. So
I'm sure she is. Hey, there's a couple like $1,000 point.
I'm like, hun, there's going to be zero. The only ROI on this purchase is going to be joy.
Joy.
So it's $1,000 to bring me some joy. So that's what's
Right.
happening. But she also knows that I'm shooting stuff all the time with my phone and stuff anyway. So she knows I'm not BSing. I'm going to use it and enjoy it. But
You
I
will,
think I
and
feel like the
you'll,
point and shoot thing is the way to go if you really want to get back into shooting nice photos with a small form factor,
yeah.
higher
Well,
quality than the phone in some cases, you know.
and
So
the youths are all about, from my understanding of just what I've seen on the internet, like point and shoot cameras are becoming a thing again, and like specifically some of the look that like on eBay, like those old PowerShot cameras are selling and going for like $200-$300 because like that's become like even like the non because the GR3, let me and make this clear, is that this is a point and shoot, so it's obviously very small, and it's about the size of an old 35 millimeter kind of compact camera, and it's got an APS-C sensor in it. So what that means is like this has got like the same size sensor as like Fujifilm's mirrorless cameras in it. This is a Sony A6000 series camera. So it's
right.
not a full frame, but it's got the next step down, which is APS-C. So the photos that this thing is capable of producing are, again, this is a sensor in this camera that is far bigger than the one inside of the new iPhones, which are still smaller than an inch. Okay.
Right.
So like there's really, you've got like an inch sensor, which is in stuff like the Sony RX100 and I think in the old Canon GX7 series cameras. And those are pretty good. I love the RX100 Mark 7. That's a great little camera to tote along. And
Yeah.
it's got its own advantages, but you get the good depth of field. The thing with the iPhone, right, is that the lens is the size of a thumbnail. And so, this is not a huge lens here. And I'll turn it on real quick. But that's the other thing with this, is that it starts up so fast. But like you can see, like the lens is not huge, but it's bigger than an iPhone's. And then obviously
Yeah.
like the sensor is it goes the length of this body. But like this thing is just so great. It's got all kinds of like little street photography things where you can either do like a set field of focus so that you don't have to autofocus. It's got all these little, nice little
Yeah.
things on it. But it's honestly an older camera, and the autofocus isn't great. It's not nearly as good as like what autofocus on an iPhone is. Like the iPhone
Right.
is in many ways technically superior to this camera. But the photos that it produces, I mean, and I was gonna share some of so I did give this a shot where I was like, I'm just gonna like use the iPhone as a dedicated camera. And I think the reason that I was like really pushing for that was twofold: Photographic Styles, and there's a new camera control button on the iPhone. So it's like you've got a dedicated shutter button now.
Yeah.
And so like
I brought your photo up here, by the way.
yeah, so like this photo here is nothing special. It's me just kind of like screwing around, but like you can kind of see the influence that Photographic Styles has on this. You're able to add a little bit of warmth, but things look good. Like this is the best, and it's not a filter because it's going through the pipeline, but like this was, a couple of minutes editing. And then the other thing that I love with the new Photographic Styles is the new stark or high contrast black and white option. It gives things a really cool look. And then let's see here. Okay, so here's some other examples from like that I shot outside. I mean, it's like you can see kind of like how you can play around with color here. Like this one's a little bit warmer, this one's a little bit cooler, and
that
then
could
this
almost
one's
pass as like a photo from the 60s.
sure, yeah. I mean,
First one, yeah.
it looks good. It looks good, and then you can and then see these are the types of photos like these architectural or detail type photos that's where you're seeing a real kind of like push from people on like, ooh, this might be able to replace my GR3.
Right.
Because one, the GR3 would not have had the reach to get this shot because it's a fixed 28 millimeter equivalent lens, whereas the iPhone has the 5X lens and you can kind of zoom in on architectural details and stuff like that. So yeah, you can get some really nice pictures. Here's another one. And this one is actually like, so this is a picture of my dog. And you can kind of see like even it looks kind of weird here because it's like blowing out all these highlights and they're actually preserved in the actual photo. But like
Okay.
the iPhone does this thing still where it's like it really wants to pump up these highlights because HDR. And
Yes.
one of the negative things with Photographic Styles is that you can't shoot it raw and then apply the photographic style. You have to use like their HEIC.
It's like the pre-processed version of your photo, but before
So it's still
applying
going
the,
through this HDR pipeline. And
Yeah.
so then you kind of have to like, then after the fact, you can try to tone it down. But here's the rub is that this is the photo that actually I was like, I'm getting the GR3 because I've been fiddling around with this photo and like Apple in many ways just refuses to drop the highlights. It
Yeah.
just refuses. It's crazy. And so you can get like photos that look good, but if you ever get into a situation like on this photo where you've got like a bright background and a subject that's kind of like hidden or kind of like in the shadows a little bit, your
Yeah.
flexibility in terms of bringing that stuff back. And again, this is stuff that most people do not care about. Here's another photo, just kind of like walking around the campus, my old college campus of like the library. Again, these are nice shots. Like I was kind of like, that's really nice. There's been several that have really just kind of like wowed me. But then, you know, I got the GR3.
Right.
And compared to the fiddliness of the iPhone, you know, I just started walking around in the backyard and you can just immediately tell, oh, there's a
Oh
big
yeah.
sensor on this camera. It's milky. It's just like,
Yeah.
and the GR3 as well, not only has like a great sensor, but the lens is so sharp. Like it's
Yeah.
so sharp. It just like you can get tack focus very quickly. Like
Yeah.
this photo here would have you know how much fiddling with the iPhone? Like the
Oh
iPhone
yeah.
has a dedicated camera macro camera mode, right? And
Yeah.
most people hate it because it triggers without you wanting it to trigger.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when
That's
you get
my
into a
biggest
situation,
problem with that one, actually, is that
and then you get into a situation where you want to use it and it doesn't work exactly like you'd like to use it. This, I literally just like popped the GR3, which also has a dedicated macro mode. I popped it into macro mode, clicked the shutter, and I was done. And like this took like 2 seconds to capture. And this is straight out of camera.
yeah.
This is an edit that came straight out of camera with a few tweaks to the negative film simulation. So the Ricoh is kind of like the Fujifilm in that it's got these film simulations that affect like the color and look of the photo. And so like, you know, you can go a little bit darker. Like I just kind of dropped the exposure on that photo there. But here's another instance of just kind of like, you can see how the focus kind of gradually falls off on this. That's just not
Yeah.
happening on an iPhone
Yeah.
without some kind
The
of
depth of
software.
field, the depth of field transition with that camera versus the phone is so buttery and
And
perfect.
here's
you
another
know?
macro shot. Like
Yeah.
this is a black and white macro landscape street photographer's dream, the Ricoh. So I mean, like we've seen like several examples now of just kind of like, here's another like high contrast black and white shot where it's just like this camera it has opinions. Like the sensor itself has opinions about like, here's how I want light to fall over something. And
Yeah.
that type of opinion is just not present on any modern smartphone.
Right. Right.
And it's a beautiful thing. And so like where that leads me is like, you know, I want, here's another example of just like, that's a shot from the Ricoh GR3 and it took 2 seconds. I framed it, I clicked the shutter, and then I didn't even have to edit. I didn't even edit this photo.
When I get this camera, it'll just be another thing that takes me away from hanging out with anybody. I seriously will drive up the coast. I'm in the California coast, and there are just miles of gorgeous, obviously the ocean opportunities, but we have so many types of plant and animal life and species out here in just a small area. Like for days, I'm going to be
Yeah.
getting photos with this
Oh,
thing.
dude,
I can't
right.
wait.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't-
my dogs will definitely are going to get flooded with this camera. I can already tell. Yeah.
Here's a good example though, thinking about that iPhone photo, right? The one that it was just giving me fits trying to get the background to, you know, and like it perfectly handled it here.
Yeah.
It understands like there's a bright background, but like I've got my metering set on center point spot metering, which is another thing the iPhone doesn't have. It doesn't have the
Yeah.
ability to be like, don't meter the whole screen, meter right where I'm telling you to meter, right? So like,
Yep.
and again, I fully recognize like that these are settings that not everybody wants to have to deal with. But
Yeah,
like, here's another
but that
one.
metering spot alone that you were just
Yeah.
talking about, that is part of the human intuition component of deciding on what kind of photo you want. That it's just not, you can't replicate it with technology. You can, or not with phone technology, like at least from what I've
They don't
seen right
care
now.
about it,
They
I
don't,
think.
because they don't care about it, because unless there's a big enough demand from the general consumer, really this is about what the general consumers want more than the pros. I mean, that's where the money is, right? That's where the volume
Right.
is. So, that's where you're always going to see limits. It's like me, right? I'm 6'4" and 277 pounds. So when cool clothes come out, they never make it in size triple XL for Rich. It's
Right.
always just I only get the generic versions of things because I'm a big dude, right?
Right. It's
But
tough.
if you wear a large and you're 5'7" and an average build or whatever,
You're
then
very happy.
you got such a variety of things to choose from. Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I mean, like, here's another example of just kind of like spot metering and just kind of being able to like choose that. It's like, oh, there's your subject, and then here's this. The iPhone. This would have looked completely different on an iPhone. That whole background would have been super bright.
yeah.
And yeah, like I don't want it super bright. So like again, where this kind of like this discussion brings us really is that we kind of need more small cameras, and the phones need
Yes.
more competition, because like like Fujifilm recently came out with this new X-M5,
Yeah.
and that's got a lot of people talking. See if you can pull that up real quick, like just like an article on the X-M5. But like the new Fujifilm X-M5 is like the smallest X series camera that they will be offering right now. It's not the smallest ever. That would go to the X70, which the X70 was like a camera. If they still made the X70, that's probably what I would have gone with instead of this GR. As good as this GR is, Fujifilm usually puts more dials and stuff, and that X70 was a camera this size with an APS-C sensor, but with also just a little bit more flexibility in those awesome Fujifilm film simulations. The new X-M5 is an interchangeable lens, so it's more like it's aimed at vloggers and content creators.
Yeah.
So you can put the different X series lenses on it. It's got the film simulations. It's got a 26 megapixel sensor. It's got these great dials. You can cycle through the film simulations with that dial on the top, and it's $800.
Yeah, the industrial design too definitely is a nice little nod to the vintage controls and look of like the film cameras too.
Yeah, I mean, and the Fuji X70 was my entry into real cameras. All right.
Okay.
And so like that was my first APS-C sensor size cameras, and I've been on a long tangent obviously ever since, but some of the
6K
shots,
video, that's pretty amazing.
well, see, and that's where the XM5 is like, you can see that the XM5 is competing with smartphones. So they were wrong, but I'll quote them anyway. But they were like, you shouldn't think about this as a competitor to other cameras. It's a competitor to smartphones. And I'm like, no, it's still a competitor to other cameras, because there's a whole industry popping up now around cameras that are alternatives to smartphones, because the camera makers realize, hey, we can make a really compact content creation solution that's way better than an iPhone in terms of the look and feel of the content. And so like you've got the Sony ZV-E10 Mark IIs, you've got the ZV-1s and other like little content creator. So this is Fujifilm's answer to that. And I've already gone ahead and put a pre-order in for this. I'm not planning on using the video features, but I've loved the Ricoh so much. I'm not giving up the Ricoh. The Ricoh is still more pocketable than this.
Dude, so cameras for you are like snare drums and guitars for me, so you don't even have to explain yourself. Yeah.
Well, this is so like I'm shooting on the Sony A7 IV, and that's my big boy. And so it's kind of like there's situations where I want to take that along, and then there's situations where I don't. And so
you can definitely tell this is competing with phones though, because like when you look at some of the features, background defocus mode blurs the background to focus on the camera's main subject.
And that's just adjusting aperture. Like
we know what that is in camera terms, but like the way that they're phrasing that is trying to cater to the general consumer, basically. And like in the pre-selfie world and the pre-vlogger and pre-whatever world, right, social media, nobody would care about background defocus so that the camera's focused on the main subject in terms of how it's worded here and how it's presented here, that feature. You have this person aiming a camera at their own face. Like that was not something that people did that often back then.
I took photo journalism courses in college, and this was 2006, 2007, something like that.
Yeah.
And they were still teaching photography in like a very especially for journalists, there were still a lot of newsrooms that were using film even then. Maybe not a lot. Maybe I think most of them have probably moved to digital by then. But like one of the first things you learn in like photojournalism, and one of the great things about the Ricoh too, is because it's a street camera, is is the axiom to like set it at f8 and just forget it, because at f8 you've just got a lot more forgiveness in terms of how depth of field works. And so like when you look at a photograph and it's got that blurry background, that's actually not great for most newspapers. Like if you're taking a photo of like a police scene, right? You don't want focus to fall off.
No,
right?
You want like the highest possible range so you can see everything in as much detail as possible in one shot. Yeah.
So whenever things were on film, it's not until we moved to digital that people started caring about bokeh, which is the blurry background and depth of field, right? Like that's been a major shift. The art look of it, details but like now everybody wants to shoot at f2.8, and then that led lenses to go like, well, how fast can we go? Can we go to f1.2? And it's like, you can shoot at f1.2 if you want. You're not going to have much fun because nothing is in focus. There's like that's like a razor thin kind of field of focus.
I know, totally. They're like, and that can look cool when you're shooting, where like there's something you want to be in focus and you don't care about anything else that is super small, like
very small,
that like a flower or a bee on a flower. Like that's where that kind of thing would be really rad looking. But outside of that, it's kind of an unmanageable.
Yeah, and you think, oh well, but 1.2 lets more light in. So basically, the small numbers on aperture mean you get more light into the camera.
Bump your
and the big
ISO then and like use the correct.
So I think a lot of people think I'm going to take this f1.2 lens into like a trade show, and there's never going to be a situation where I have to touch ISO. And it's like, that might be right, but there's also going to be instances where you're just kind of, you thought you nailed focus on that. So anyway, I mean, we're kind of going down the rabbit hole, but like the amount of kind of options that these small, what my hope is that I love the fact that Fujifilm, and specifically Fujifilm, I love that they're kind of like, hey, there's an opportunity here. Like, and I don't think that it's completely settled. You've got guys like the YouTube and TikTokers that we were talking about earlier, Twin Tour, where it's like their workflow, the camera still wouldn't make sense because they love being able to do everything on the phone. They shoot the video, they edit the video, they upload the video to Reels or YouTube Shorts or whatever. Yeah. So like for them, it's just it's the phone is kind of over. So where that puts the camera manufacturers, and this is still like this. The Ricoh actually works pretty good for getting things on and off of the card and onto the phone. Like the app is still not great, but it works. So they still have got a long way to go in figuring out like how do we get the stuff off the camera and make that super convenient. But it's like, I think also as well, like some of the whenever you're doing content on the phone and then your workflow is like, I don't care really how it looks so much. I think that's when Photographic Styles, I think that's when like, and bringing Photographic Styles to video, I think is the next step. Like Apple, that would be really cool because I'm not going to be, like I said, I'm not really going to be shooting a bunch of video with the X-M5 because in most situations, I know that the iPhone video is going to be better.
Yeah.
It's just not the way on
for that.
On stills.
Well, cool. Well, I think we gave a pretty good high level overview of detailed overview of all these things, but
go buy a camera and try it. That's kind of what we're both saying is
go get a point and shoot and throw your phone on the garbage, but even though that might help humanity, but leave it in your car. Leave it somewhere where you don't need it anymore, and you can just go immerse yourself in the joy of shooting some great photos and putting all of your brain thought into shooting nice photos.
If you've got an iPhone 13 or an iPhone 14 or 15 or a 12, and you're kind of like looking at the iPhone 16s, and you're kind of like, man, maybe I would use maybe it's gonna like improve my experience, like that dedicated camera control button and the Photographic Styles and take that $1,000 and put it into a camera that is not going to make you a little bit more happy, but just kind of like one of my kind of like last point on this is I have like the iPhone Photos widget that runs and just kind of like loops photos, and then we have a couple of the Google Nest Home products that are cycling through photos.
Right.
It's just it'll pop up an iPhone photo, and I'm like, okay, cool. But whenever there's a photo that pops up that I've taken with a real camera, it's just different. It hits you different. It makes you go, wow, like I took that. Like that's like,
it's like they say about hot Cheetos. It just hits different.
Yes. Real cameras.
Although I can't say, my wife is a big
Cheetos.
Hot Cheetos fan. I can handle them a little bit, if I'm starving to death or,
right.
starving
I
to
love
death.
a hot Cheeto.
So,
yeah.
But
Give me a
nothing
hot
beats
Cheeto.
the OG Cheetos for me. Like I would rather just bathe in the cheesy goodness of the OG Cheeto, whenever I have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Hot Cheetos, I guess the good thing about Hot Cheetos is because it's such a harsh experience. Like you can only handle so many. Although if you're a teenager, those kids, man, they're eating those things by the pound. I don't know how they're going to deal with that later in life, but
I think also in rounding out the discussion is like you mentioned, it's like I pre-ordered the XM5. I'm not getting rid of my GR, and I have this A7 IV. But what I love the most is the fact that if I don't have any of those, I've still got a phone that is accessible. That I know it's going to be a little bit more work.
Yeah.
But if that's what I've got. And it's waterproof, essentially. Like, you can take that. And we went to the beach this summer. I would never take this thing on the beach because, like, sand and dust will just destroy this thing. And it doesn't take much. Like, sea breeze, could, like, if you get a little too close, like, again, this is like when you start this thing up, you can kind of see this is all exposed. All of that's exposed.
I would freak out. I would not ever bring that to any.
You don't have to worry about that with an iPhone. Like, I'm in the waves, I'm taking, and the video that I'm taking is incredible, and then I'm able to take raw photos that I can work with in Lightroom later. And so that's the thing. It's
the right tool for the job, dude.
That's right. We live in an era of choice that is so, like, we can gripe about Apple's choices with HDR and everything else like that, but the fact of the matter is you have so many tools available to you. Yeah. But if you're thinking camera control is going to give you the ultimate camera, and like I was thinking a couple of weeks ago, I was mistaken. The GR3 is excellent. You should definitely check it out. But
rad. That's the one I'm going to be purchasing. All right, cool, man. Well, that is it for today's episode 8 of Quasar with Fries. Gave you guys a nice overview of some point and shoot options for shooting. Some of the arguments against, using a phone versus a real camera. What are some of the other things to consider? And Wayne, thanks again for your insight and the fact that we could exploit the fact that you let your own bank account take a sledgehammer to it so that we could understand these cameras better.
Tune back in for sure. Stay tuned. But like next month, I'll have my thoughts on the XM5, and like I'm super stoked to get that camera, because again, it'll just be like it's like an in-betweener. Like, I want to carry that on a strap, but I don't want to bring a full camera bag like I'd need with the A7 IV. So, I mean, it's...
Straight, dude, you sold me. You sold me. All right, guys. So, thanks again for joining us. Feel free to comment, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. We appreciate you, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Peace.